What they are doing is, in essence, cooking the books.
Right.
This administration is clearly privileging the needs of the oil and gas and fossil fuel industry at the expense of the American people. The dinner in Mar-a-Lago.
Give me $1 billion and that's
$1 billion and I will do what you want. Juxtaposing repeal of the endangerment finding with this Super Bowl halftime show. Bad Bunny performance.
On grid stability.
On grid stability. Trump's maximalist power may have peaked. We're starting to see some pushback.
Manish Bapna, welcome back to Outrage Optimism. We are here to talk about the rollback of the endangerment finding under the EPA. How did this unfold? What's the inside story of what happened here?
This was a debate during the first administration. We anticipated that this was going to happen during the second administration. There were quite strong ideologues within the second administration that wanted to undercut any future administration's ability to tackle climate. Climate deniers that see this as a path that should not be taken. And so those ideological voices outweighed the more establishment voices in the Republican Party around what to do. But in addition to that, I think what we saw was the deal that was done with the oil and gas industry during the campaign. You remember the dinner in Mar-a-Lago.
Give me $1 billion
and I will do what you want. Well, this administration is clearly privileging the needs of the oil and gas and fossil fuel industry executives and lobbyists at the expense of the American people. And that is what led to this much more frontal attack on climate change during the second administration.
Does that mean that the US has lost its ability to deal at a federal level with climate change at all?
What the endangerment finding was a determination in 2009 under the Obama years that climate change endangered public health and welfare. And so it connected the dots between climate change and public health and welfare, which then enabled the Environmental Protection Agency, the federal government, not only enabled, but required the federal government to then tackle climate change as a pollutant. So by putting forward a finding that decision was a mistake, by repealing the endangerment finding, not only does it undercut the scientific argument, but that also has formed the basis for federal rules and standards to tackle greenhouse gas emissions. If the endangerment finding is successful in being repealed, then it would, over time, undercut the ability to regulate greenhouse gases from power plants or methane from oil and gas operations and so forth. So it is the foundational element that federal standards on greenhouse gas emissions rely upon.
So this is a huge deal. This is going to materially affect the United States emissions trajectory in your analysis.
Absolutely, because what you've seen in the past year with this Trump administration is a number of things. You've seen the evisceration of the Inflation Reduction Act, the big U.S. climate law that provided incentives. Think of the carrots to encourage investments in clean energy. Now you're seeing the evisceration of the federal rules and standards, a bit more the regulatory side, the sticks, to try to encourage the shift to clean. And on top of that, what you're seeing with this administration is the weaponization of the permitting system. So even projects that aren't relying on the incentives, clean energy projects, solar, wind, storage, but particularly wind and solar, offshore wind in particular has been at the crosshairs of this administration. They are, in essence, making it almost impossible to actually build these projects. So what you're seeing at the moment is a multi-pronged attack on clean energy and climate change from this administration.
It's so fascinating because you've used the word ideology a few times. We're at a point now where renewables are the cheapest form of new power. The US is building enormous amounts of data centers. We now have a demand for more power in a way that we haven't had. And yet we have an administration that is so ideological that it's taking the country in a different direction. It's a sort of through the looking glass kind of moment, really, isn't it?
This administration is trying to make three arguments. They're making a scientific argument, they're making a legal argument, and they're making an economic argument. The scientific argument, some of you will remember the Department of Energy a few months ago released this climate skeptic report challenging the climate science, which was routinely panned by scientists, within the United States, all around the world. The national academies came out with a very strong rebuttal. The legal argument that they're making, which is what this repeal of the endangerment finding particularly rests on, is that the Clean Air Act doesn't give explicit authority to the administration to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, that this was a false reading of statutory law. What's important to note is that the Supreme Court has already opined on this matter 3 times in the past 20 years, 15 years, and has said that the EPA does have that authority. It's more a question of how it exercises that authority, not whether it has that authority. And the third argument that this administration, because it's quite shocking, is an economic argument. And what they are doing is, in essence, cooking the books. They are looking only at the cost to industry, and they have zeroed out the benefits to people or to planet. They're making the argument that the social cost of carbon should be zero, that the value of human life, because it's difficult to quantify,
should be set at zero.
They should be zero.
Right.
So now they're saying in this argument, there's 1.3 million in costs to the auto industry by having Biden's car and truck rules. And therefore, if we eliminate the rules, there'll be 1.3 trillion in savings, when they have basically said, we don't know how to quantify the benefits, so there's zero. This is the economic argument.
You said something very interesting. You said that you will sue and you expect to win. So talk us through that. What is the legal case by which you're going to challenge this attempt to repeal the endangerment finding?
The argument that we believe this administration is going to make is that the Clean Air Act provides statutory language around local and regional pollution, that climate change is a global problem and therefore should not be, is not covered adequately by the statutory language of the Clean Air Act. We feel that the Supreme Court has already decided, opined on this issue in multiple decisions in the past. Now, although we have seen this Supreme Court upend precedent in terms of previous Supreme Court decisions, we have not really seen the Supreme Court challenge decisions that are based on statutory language.
Right.
I do think what we're seeing in the United States at this point is that perhaps the time of Trump's maximalist power on the government or on the country may have peaked, and we're starting to see some pushback.
And what happens to the existing regulations during that time period?
The existing regulations, depending on what the legal strategy is for those that choose to challenge it, will likely be on ice.
So how does a business interpret that? Because they don't know which regulations they're actually subject to.
Right.
So how are businesses responding to that situation? It must be a nightmare.
One of the big challenges around the endangerment finding, and why even the oil and gas industry, through their trade associations, did not strongly advocate for its repeal, is that if you repeal the endangerment finding, you could end up in a patchwork,
which is very expensive
situation.
Yeah.
One thing business does not like, it is uncertainty or the pendulum swinging back and forth.
Right.
I think to some extent the headlines talk understandably and correctly about the evisceration of federal climate policy. But take a look at what states are doing. Take a look at where businesses are investing. And I think you get a more complex picture and a slightly more positive picture, because we know that the economics of clean have changed profoundly in the last 10 years. It is starting to cut through to the public. Juxtaposing repeal of the endangerment finding with this Super Bowl halftime show, when Bad Bunny has a part of his performance the impacts of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico.
On grid stability.
Grid stability is a really important image about what is happening today.
Yeah.
The argument I would make is, yes, the headlines all around the world on what this administration is doing is devastating, and those are true. And yet the country's a lot bigger than what happens in Washington.
Manish, we are grateful to you. We're grateful for you. We're grateful for the great work you do at NRDC. Thank you so much for joining us and for that great message, and all power to your incredible work. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tom. Good to be with you.